A mother talks about space to her daughter and what scientists say about it. She says they know nothing about the space dog, who chases comets and rolls in stardust. The space dog takes a bite out of the moon almost every night, and that explains why the moon has phases. And when it's a full moon, it's the moon goddess Changi, who has made the space dog spit out the bite. The mother and her kid giggle at her story when her father cuts in. He offers to give the scientific explanation, but the girl says she will stick to her mommy's explanation. The girl requests the story of the moon goddess again, and her mother gives in. Long ago, Changi and another god called Hui were in love, but the magic potion that Changi took made her float away, leaving behind her true love. She lives and waits for him on the moon above, and has only the jade rabbit by her side. After Hui died on Earth, Changi cried and the tears turned into stardust. The little girl asks her father if he thinks the story of Changi is real, and he says yes. The girl is flying a rabbit rocket on the streets. Her parents are in their little pastry shop and tell her to slow down and help them make the mooncakes. The girl is excited and practices beside her mother. While watching the preparation and selling process, the little girl grows a few years older. But her mother is now sick. The little girl is given a tiny rabbit as a present by her parents, and her mother dies shortly after. 4 years later, the girl grows up and her name is Fei Fei. She starts helping her father in his work, and the rabbit follows her to make deliveries of mooncakes. It is the moon festival, so the atmosphere is exciting. She makes a stop at a train construction site and chats excitedly about magnetic levitation. Fei returns home to find out that the guest her father's expecting is Mrs. Zhong, and they seem close. Mrs. Zhong has convinced Fei Fei's father to use dates in the mooncake recipe, and this upsets Fei. While she tries to clean the mess that Mrs. Zhong made in the kitchen, a boy leaps over her with his pet frog. His name is Chin, and he is Mrs. Zhong's son. At dinner, Fei gets teased by her aunties about her belief in Changi and her story, and even her father seems to no longer believe in her. She learns that he would marry Mrs. Zhong and runs to her room. The moon shines brightly into Fei's room, and the rabbit, who she called Bungie, jumps into the streets, and Fei goes out looking for her. She finds him at the river bank where she spent time with her mother. She sees Bungie and a bird staring at each other. She breaks down and gazes at the moon, and then calls on her mother. Then she decides to build a rocket to fly to the moon, to make her father believe it is real, and thinks if she does it, her father will remember her mother, and leaves Mrs. Zhong. All her efforts fail until she decides to use magnetic levitation. But Chin gets on the rocket without her knowledge. They're a few meters from the moon when the rocket stops and starts falling back. They are yelling their lungs out when everything stops and a beam of green light pulls their vehicle to the moon. Their rocket suddenly gets attacked by space lions. They've kicked off the beam of light and onto the surface of the moon. And then they are knocked out from the fierce landing. The space lions pick them up from the wreckage and take them to a magical place. Talking mooncakes roll out and drag them into a dark, empty place. They hear a lady's voice, and soon Changi reveals herself, singing in a beautiful voice, and entering a massive crowd of magical forms. Changi asks for her gift, but Fei has no idea what she's talking about. Then, Changi gives in to Fei's request for a photo together, but refuses to give her the photo if she doesn't have her gift. And this gift is what will bring Hui back to her. She announces a competition in the whole of Lunaria, which is the name of the kingdom. She promises to grant the wish of whoever brings her the gift before the last dust of the moon falls away, and all hopes of bringing Hui back are lost. Chin tries to offer Fei his help, but she rejects him. He tells her they would be siblings, but she says that would never happen. That hurts Chin, and Bungie runs off with him. Fei then hitches a ride with a bunch of magical chicks. She lies to the lead that she knows where the gift is, so that he'd let her use his bike. Chin is sulking, and says he will be a great brother. And Bungie seems to agree with him. He sees a line of mooncakes marching inside, and their leader is holding the photo of Changi and Fei. Chin decides to bring the photo to Fei to prove his worthiness of her as a sister. He charges at the mooncakes, but magical algae-looking forms appear out of nowhere, and it comes after him. He tries to touch them, but they're charged with electricity. Changi shows up and dismisses the forms, and calls them palace security. When asked why he was in the palace, Chin says he wants the photo for Faye. Changi then reminds him that they can only get the photo after giving her the gift. Chin says he knows where the gift is, and is dragged to the interrogation room. She says they will play a game of table tennis, and the winner gets either the photo or the gift. Against all odds, Chin wins the game, but she walks away in anger and locks Chin in the interrogation room, and tells her attendants that they're running out of time. The mooncakes try to calm her down with yoga, but Changi ends up crying and causing a meteor shower. She asks the Jade Rabbit if the potion is working, but his ears drop. Changi flares up and causes terrible storms. Meanwhile, the meteor shower has caught up with Faye and the chicks. They want to turn back, since going on with the mission with the current weather situation is suicide. However, Faye insists to continue and help them drive through the storm. In the interrogation room, Chin is still stuck. He keeps trying to run through the doors, and his pet frog tells him to give up. Faye and the chicks have arrived at the wreckage site. She finds another alien named Gobi. He talks so much and annoys Faye, and he is an advisor for Changi. He was kicked out of the palace according to the Lunarian chickens. Faye manages to get them off his back, and they joke around. She sees her Changi doll, and decides it must be the gift which Changi has been looking for. She excitedly shows it to the chickens, but they take it from her and run off to the palace without her. Faye is without a bike or vehicle to bring her back to the palace. After much nagging, she agrees to let Gobi help her find her way back to the palace. Meanwhile, Bungie follows the Jade Rabbit into a flower's hole and watches him work on the potion. It doesn't work out, and she gives out her hideout by mistake. The bowl for the potion is about to fall off because the Jade Rabbit was startled. Bungie steps in and stops the bowl from falling just in time. She climbs onto the same space as the Jade Rabbit and he sways, tipping off something on the next elevated space. Sparks fly and hit Bungie's ears. She loves the transformation and rubs her nose against the Jade Rabbit's nose. The affectionate act produces sparkles that fall into the potion bowl, and it seems to work now. Bungie walks away and the Jade Rabbit works on the rest of the potion. Faye and Gobi are still on the long walk back to the palace. Gobi is talking non-stop and gets tongue-tied. He rolls off and lands on the lower ground on the moon. Magical flying frogs are awakened, and they try to feed on Gobi and Faye. Faye uses Gobi's long tongue to latch onto a frog's head. They settle there and hope to get to the palace faster. Gobi tells Faye about the reason he was exiled. He sang a song that upset Changi. Faye is disappointed that she's the opposite of everything her mother said. But Gobi explains that she changed when Hui died. Gobi says that he sang a song about her change, and she then disappeared for a period, which they call the Great Darkness. Gobi sings the song he sang to the Queen. It's a song about taking in the world, letting go of the past, and letting your heart grow, so you can glow. Faye then sees the chicks at last. Gobi tries to snatch the doll with his tongue, but he only makes the chicks aware of their presence. Faye struggles, but fails to get the doll back. She then tells Gobi all about the plan to stop her dad from getting remarried. She decides to eat the mooncakes that Mrs. Zhong gave her, and bites a glass. She discovers an amulet, and brings it to Changi. It is the gift she has been looking for. Changi puts the pieces of the amulet together, and Hui appears again. However, he soon leaves, saying he can't stay, and that Changi needs to move on. She breaks down, and the Great Darkness returns. Changi has locked herself up in darkness, and no one can penetrate. However, Faye walks through the barrier. Even with the knowledge that she mightn't come out alive, Faye sees her own past with her mum, and ends up falling into sadness too. Changi comforts Faye, and convinces her to accept the love that's around her. Bungie tries to break the barrier, but it's no use. Changi tells Faye to move on, and assures her that her mother's spirit will always be with her. Chin breaks through the barrier at that moment, and they decide to go home. Changi says it's too late for her, since Hui isn't returning, but Faye shows her all the love of Gobi and the mooncakes around her. She sings the ending part of Gobi's song, and assures Changi that Hui's spirit is always with her too. They then gather around Changi for a group hug, and the Lunaria kingdom lights up once again. Faye says goodbye to the Lunarians, and Changi hands her the picture. Faye lets Bungie stay with the Jade Rabbit, and says goodbye to Gobi. The flying space lions lift Faye and Chin, and fly them to Earth. The picture then dissolves. They make it back to Earth and Faye piggybacks Chin all the way home. She sees her father waiting for her, and it warms her heart. After a while, her father and Mrs. Zhong are married. Chin and Faye get along well, and it is time for another moon festival. The family has gathered as before, but this time the mood is cheerier. Faye smiles warmly as they chatter about Changi, and listens fondly to Mrs. Zhong's family lore about mooncakes. Her father sits at the river bank with Faye, mentions that she laughs just like her mother, and they laugh together. She looks at her scarf with Changi picture on it, and spots the same bird from the other night when Bunji ran off. They share a knowing smile, and the bird pats her on the head and flies away. Chin then interrupts the moment again, and plays catch with Faye. Thanks for watching, take care and see you in the next video.
All this money,